For those of you who are new to ITSM Academy, we are a full service provider of IT service management related education and training. So we provide training on ITIL and DevOps and employee experience, process design, agile, lean, value stream management. And we're very committed here at the Academy to make sure that you get just enough education. And this is something our speaker today, Jeff Rumburg, is going to talk about. Our motto here at the Academy is educate and inspire. We don't believe that everybody in an organization needs to be certified or go on to advanced education. Some people need to just be aware of the different frameworks and processes that you've got in place in your organization. And to that end, we've got some key concepts like education, non-certification type education. And then some people do need to be certified and go on to advanced education. Again, the idea is to get just enough education to meet your organization's circumstances and needs and goals, and to make sure that you can appropriately leverage and get a return on investment from your IT service management education and initiatives. And that's what our speaker today is going to talk about. We have Jeff Rumburg, who is the managing partner with MetricNet, and he's going to talk about ITIL hacks. And the spirit of it is those ways in which you can kind of adopt best practices and ways of working, but adapt them or hack them in order to make sure that you're seeing a return on investment. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to Jeff. Jeff, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to let you share yours. And also, if you could please tell everybody a little bit more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. Let me see how I can share my screen here. And
while Jeff's taking the controls, let me just say that Jeff is absolutely willing to answer questions as we go along. And I'm going to monitor those questions for him. So if you have any questions, throw them into the chat window. I'll be kind of monitoring, and again, we'll try to answer them as we go along. So without further ado, Jeff Rumburg.
Thank you, Donna. It's always a pleasure to be here. And I regret that we didn't get a chance to catch up with each other at the recent Service World Live conference. We were both there and we crossed paths a couple of times, but we didn't get a chance to catch up with each other. So thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure. Some of you on today's webcast probably know me already. If you don't, let me just give you a brief introduction and then we'll dive right into the presentation. And as Donna mentioned, I'm happy to answer questions as I go through the slides. So feel free to raise your hand or jump in some way so that Donna can read the question out and I can give you an answer. I've been in the industry now for more than 30 years. I got started with a company that I founded called the Verity Group. We launched what was called the Help Desk Benchmarking Consortium, and we quickly had more than 100 members of the benchmarking consortium. That led to a fairly robust practice in contact center, service desk, and desktop support benchmarking. That company that I started was later sold to Gartner, and I went to work for Gartner. I was there for roughly 10 years. I was head of their global IT benchmarking practice, but in 2006, I got the itch to go out on my own again. So I left Gartner and started the company that I now run, which is MetricNet. So MetricNet focuses on IT service and support benchmarking. We help organizations measure their performance versus industry best practices and versus other service desks, desktop support, field service organizations in the industry. We help them mature their metrics. We help them leverage metrics, not just for reporting and observational purposes, but also for diagnostic and prescriptive purposes. That is, getting metrics to the point where you can act on them and see measurable outcomes as a result of your continuous improvement initiatives. So I've been around the industry for quite some time. I've spoken at virtually every HDI event since the founding of HDI in 1989. And I was lucky enough to be chosen to speak twice at the recent HDI conference, the Service World Live conference. And I'm presenting some of those ideas today in the ITIL hacks presentation. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and dive right into it. So everything you see and hear today in my presentation is empirical in nature, meaning that it is not based on any academic ideas or theoretical ideas. These are observations that we've made in the industry based on more than 4,000 IT service and support benchmarks since MetricNet was started. We now have the industry's largest global database of IT process and performance indicators. We track more than 70 metrics, everything from cost per ticket and customer satisfaction to mean time to resolve and first contact resolution rate. So we track a lot of metrics, and we have also identified and documented nearly 120 industry best practices. These best practices cover the areas of IT service and support strategy, human resource management, ticket handling, processes and procedures, technology, performance measurement and management, the metrics discipline, and then finally a category that we call stakeholder communication. So as we conduct our benchmarks, we continuously add to our benchmarking database, and we're in a great position to have a bird's eye view, an overview of what's happening in the industry. We get an early warning of what's going on. We get to see trends as they unfold. We get to see the dynamics of the industry as service and support evolves. ITIL Hacks is based upon observations that we've seen in this industry, observations from organizations that are executing and implementing the ideas of ITIL and trying to gain benefit from the ITIL framework. And what we want to share with you today are some of the ways that we have seen success in this industry, some of the ways that these organizations have been successful deploying the tactics and strategy of ITIL. Now, for those who have been in the industry for a while, you know that we went through a transition from ITIL 3 to ITIL 4 a little over 3 years ago. It was actually 2019 that ITIL 3 was retired and ITIL 4 was rolled out. ITIL 3 had 26 industry best industry procedures. ITIL 4 has 34 practices. So from ITIL 3 to ITIL 4, we went from 26 procedures to 34 practices. So it became more comprehensive. And specifically what you see in the red boxes on this particular chart are knowledge management and problem management, because I've got two case studies today that I want to go through, one each on knowledge management and problem management. But the big three ITIL practices that we find most service and support organizations spend the majority of their time on are problem, knowledge, and incident management. Now, it doesn't mean that the other 31 are unimportant, but it does mean that most in IT service and support find that they get the biggest bang for the buck by focusing their time and attention on problem management, knowledge management, and incident management. Real quickly, problem management is about getting to root causes for problems that are driving incident volume. And once you understand those root causes, you have the potential to eliminate those root causes and thereby eliminating the incidents associated with those root causes. Knowledge management is about curating knowledge articles that can be reused by both customers of service and support, as well as the technicians and analysts who work in service and support, by capturing knowledge around incidents, service requests, and so on. That knowledge can be reused, and oftentimes you can increase your first contact resolution rate, reduce your handle time, and increase customer satisfaction by leveraging knowledge. And incident management is about managing an incident over the course of its life cycle, making sure that incident management processes and procedures follow industry best practices, ensuring that there is an owner of every incident as it progresses through the resolution process, identifying proper points of escalation, and so on. So again, these are not necessarily the only ITIL practices that you need to be concerned about, but these are among the three. They are the three that most service and support organizations spend most of their time on. Now, the traditional approach to ITIL, many of you probably know this. The history of ITIL is that it was started in the UK around 1985 by the government of Margaret Thatcher, who was the Prime Minister of the UK at the time. And the United Kingdom was spending hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars per year on information technology. And the government started to ask questions about what are we getting for this massive investment? Are we learning anything? Are we automating our processes? Are we transforming the government from a paper-based government and an employee face-to-face government into a digital government? And they were legitimate questions. And out of that came a comprehensive group of practices known as the Information Technology Infrastructure Library, ITIL. It's no longer called the Information Technology Infrastructure Library. It's simply called ITIL, but that's originally what ITIL stood for. And the idea was that if we develop this discipline, a framework around which we could understand IT service management, we would be able to build a vocabulary, a vernacular around that. We would be able to measure the maturity of things like problem management and incident and knowledge management. And so this nascent idea from the mid-1980s has become a multi-billion-dollar industry today around helping organizations manage the practices, the 34 separate practices that comprise ITIL today. Now, traditionally, what organizations will do when they're contemplating maturing their ITIL practices is that they will start with training, and there's 5 levels of training. There's the foundations training, and then there's an intermediate level of training or a practitioner level of training, and that then goes on to advanced and then ITIL master. So 5 separate levels of ITIL training. Not everybody goes through all 5, of course, and to Donna's introductory comments, not everybody needs to go through all 5 levels of ITIL training. But typically when organizations are contemplating taking the dive into ITIL and maturing their ITIL practices and leveraging them for better outcomes in IT service and support, they begin with some foundation training of key individuals within the organization. Some of those individuals will go on beyond the foundation training and become trained at a practitioner level. Some of those will go even further. They'll go to an intermediate level. Some go further. They'll go to an advanced level, and eventually you can become an ITIL master. But it begins with training. There are certifications that go along with the various levels of training. And then the idea is to mature your ITIL practices. And I'm careful to use the term practice because ITIL 4 has 34 practices. ITIL 3 had 26 processes. But we use the word practice now. And the idea is that the training and certification will lead to the maturation of key ITIL practices. And then there are assessments that are done of the ITIL practices to determine that level of maturity. And eventually the intent is that you get some ROI out of this. In other words, you get some benefit from all of this time and effort that you invest in ITIL. Well, I want to go back to a slide that I showed earlier, which spoke about the fact that everything I present today is empirical in nature. It's based on these benchmarks that we have done over many years. We have this comprehensive benchmarking database. So we're in a position to ask the question, can we find and can we identify measurable benefits, measurable results that come out of ITIL? And the way we do that is we look at organizations at their different ITIL maturity levels, everything from maturity level 1 all the way up to maturity level 5. Think of a CMM or a capability maturity model where 1 is the least mature and 5 is the most mature. And what we did is we set out to identify organizations at different levels of ITIL maturity, and we regress that against various metrics such as cost per ticket, customer satisfaction, net promoter score, customer effort score, customer experience, and cycle time metrics like mean time to resolve, first contact resolution rate, and the like. So think cost, quality, cycle time, better, faster, cheaper. So kind of a cliche, but the reality is there are only 3 dimensions of competition. There's speed, there's cycle time, and there's cost. So when I say better, faster, cheaper, at a tactical level, every service and support organization is continuously looking for ways to become better. In other words, higher quality, faster, meaning quicker resolution times, and cheaper. Not necessarily lower cost per ticket, but lower total cost of ownership. And I do have a TCO slide that I'll present in a few minutes here, and we'll talk in depth at total cost of ownership and shift left and the implications of ITIL for total cost of ownership. So what we did is we went looking for examples of organizations that had matured their ITIL practices and what benefit did they get? Could we measure the cost, quality, cycle time and say, okay, yes, mature ITIL practices do lead to these better outcomes. And here's what we discovered is that many organizations don't really tie all the effort that they put into ITIL to these better outcomes. ITIL is very practice focused, very process oriented, as you all know. And the idea is as you mature these practices, you will become a more mature IT organization overall, specifically in service management, IT service management maturation. But most organizations that have made the plunge or just dipped their toe into ITIL and begun to mature in that direction aren't specifically tracking their outcomes, but they should, because if you're making this investment in education and training and certification and maturation, you want to know, are you getting better results as a result of the efforts that you're putting into ITIL? And this is what led us to the idea of an ITIL hack. And specifically, are there shortcuts, if you will? That's a little bit of a strong term, but the idea is, can we shortcut our way to ITIL success? Can we get the benefits of ITIL, the benefits of problem management, which is reduced incident volume, the benefits of knowledge management, which is reduced handle time and higher first contact resolution rate and better customer satisfaction? Can we get the benefits of incident management, meaning fewer ticket hops and quicker first contact resolutions, or higher first contact resolutions, higher first level resolutions, and single transfers, meaning getting the ticket to the right person at the right place at the right time? Can we get that? Can we get these benefits, shortcut our way to achieving some of these benefits of ITIL? And the answer, it turns out, is yes. And some of the most successful organizations with ITIL are actually hacking ITIL. And that term doesn't completely describe what these organizations are doing, but you'll see momentarily how they get to the result of ITIL without necessarily spending a huge amount of time in that diagram that I showed you here. In other words, they spend the necessary time in training and certification and maturation, but they are very results focused. They're very results oriented. And what they're asking themselves is, how do we get to ticket reduction, that is fewer tickets? How do we get to reduce total cost of ownership? How do we get to reduced mean time to resolve? How do we get there quickly? And so they're very results focused, which ITIL doesn't necessarily emphasize. And so the idea behind an ITIL hack is that you become not so much process focused, going methodically through the process of training and maturation and certification, but rather you become results focused. And you focus on, how do we get better, faster, cheaper by leveraging the principles of ITIL? So let me define an ITIL hack, because I haven't done that yet. It bypasses the traditional approach to ITIL. It is results oriented, and it involves design thinking. And I'll define that momentarily, but essentially design thinking says in effect that you start with an end result. What are you trying to get out of ITIL? And now let's back up and think about our organization, our unique organization, our culture, our organizational dynamics, and how is it that we are going to get the results that we want, the better, faster, cheaper, higher quality, quicker resolution times, and lower cost per ticket. So it starts with a goal, works backwards from there. It's tailored for your unique organization. So rather than go through a methodical approach that says, you have to follow these steps to mature your ITIL practices, and then you become mature at a particular level, and then you begin maturing problem incident knowledge management. It will look somewhat different for every organization. In fact, it can look markedly different as you go from one organization to another, or from one vertical market to another. And the idea is that you would get results quickly. So rather than waiting months or years, or in some cases, we don't see any measurable results from an organization's investment in ITIL. And what we're trying to do is emphasize this idea that you should be looking for results with your ITIL initiatives. You should be looking for results literally in days or weeks, not months, years, or never. And it is possible. It might sound impossible to get ITIL results in days or weeks, but we've seen it firsthand. I've got two examples for you that I'll share a little bit later in this presentation, from an insurance company and another one from a retail organization, that showed how they got the benefits of ITIL in a relatively short period of time. Now, a moment ago, I spoke about design thinking. This is a concept that came out of the Stanford Design School. This is one of my alma maters. They didn't have the design school when I was there. It was something that was developed and invented, if you will, became a separate discipline. It's separate from engineering. It's separate from computer science. It's an actual design school within Stanford University. But the idea here is that you can iterate your way towards success. And you look for what works and you build on that. You look at what doesn't work and you discard it very, very quickly. And so you'll notice here towards the end of the methodology, you have prototype and test. And in both of those, it says iterate quickly as the last bullet point in prototype, and the last bullet point in test is to iterate quickly. What does that mean? It simply means that you try things to see if they work, and if they don't work, you discard them, and if they do work, you keep them and you build on those. And the idea is that although we may have an end state in mind, an end state for problem management of reduced TCO and reduced ticket volume, an end state for knowledge management of quicker resolution times, higher first contact resolution rate, and higher customer satisfaction, and an end state for knowledge management or of incident management, of being able to resolve tickets more quickly, quicker mean times to resolve, better customer satisfaction, and also fewer ticket hops, fewer ping pongs, if you will, getting the ticket to the right person at the right place at the right time. So how do we get there? What are the things that work? Can we iterate to get to better and faster and cheaper? And the answer is yes. This is what design thinking is all about, is that you try things, little experiments, if you will, very, they don't take weeks or months, they literally take hours or days, and you try things to see if they work. And if they work, you build on those, you iterate on those, you improve upon them continuously over time. And design thinking starts with the end goal, and it works backwards from there. And eventually you get to a point where you have a set of processes that are working to make your service and support better and faster and cheaper. And you have this ITIL framework that you're operating within. Not, as Donna mentioned in the introductory remarks, not everybody has to become certified at a master's level or an advanced level, but the vernacular and the knowledge around ITIL is very helpful to have. So at the very least, you should be thinking about the foundation level certification so that you can become comfortable with the ITIL methodology approach, the different practices, the vernacular, the language around ITIL. That is enormously helpful. So be thinking at least about that. And to the extent that you want to dive deeper in ITIL, there's really no limit to where you can go with ITIL. But design thinking, we believe, is a central part of ITIL success. It's central to connecting the dots between ITIL as a set of practices, 34 separate practices, and outcomes, better, faster, cheaper. Design thinking is what I would call the glue that holds everything together. And it's the methodology that gets you from this framework, ITIL, 34 best practices, to these outcomes. You are trying to get to better, faster, cheaper, lower total cost of ownership, fewer tickets, better outcomes, first contact resolution rate, better customer satisfaction, better customer experience, and quicker resolution times, meaning higher first contact resolution rate and lower mean times to resolve. So if we think about two important dimensions here, the level of effort and commitment you make to ITIL, x-axis, with lower effort on the right, that's the green, higher effort on the left, that's the red, versus the y-axis, measurable results, better, faster, cheaper, and they can be measured. The traditional approach to ITIL doesn't emphasize results enough, and it is very focused on the process of maturing ITIL. So we put that data point down in the lower left quadrant. So there's a lot of effort involved in the traditional approach to ITIL, but it's not very focused on results. And what we're proposing is that we think there should be more focus on results. So you move up the y-axis, but at the same time, ironically, what we've discovered is that those that are most successful when they focus on results and get results are the ones that spend the least time maturing their ITIL practices. It's not because ITIL is bad, it's because they're connecting the dots and saying, we want to get benefit from this. So let's get the amount of training that we need, but let's not overdo it. Donna made that point as well in her introductory remarks, is that You need the training that you need, but you don't need to overdo it. Not everybody needs a PhD. Not everybody needs a master's degree, or in some cases, not everybody even needs a bachelor's degree. What you need is a level of education and knowledge that enables you to be successful. That's what ITIL hacks are all about. You need to know ITIL enough to understand what you're trying to get out of ITIL, but ultimately you have to connect this methodology to results. So the upper right-hand data point here is where you are both efficient and effective. The effective part is the y-axis. Are we getting benefit from ITIL? Are we getting better, faster, cheaper outcomes? And the efficient part is the x-axis. Are we able to do this without everybody becoming master level certified or even advanced level certified? Are we able to do this by getting comfortable with the vernacular of ITIL, getting people certified at a basic level, and getting the knowledge we need to achieve these better outcomes? So enough education without doing it. And that in and of itself is an iterative process because, as you know, you don't just educate and then go out into the world and become an ITIL practitioner. You go back and forth. You get some education, you work implementing these practices, you get some more education, you work some more getting. So iterative, and going back to the Stanford School of Design, iterate quickly is the last bullet point in prototyping and testing. The same thing is true with ITIL. If you need additional expertise, if you need additional knowledge and training, of course, you go back and get it. But the emphasis needs to be more in ITIL on getting results, the y-axis. Are we getting better, faster, cheaper? And can we tie it to our efforts in ITIL? And that's what ITIL hacks are all about, is how do we get to these beneficial results of quicker resolution times, lower total cost of ownership, and better customer satisfaction. How do we get there as quickly as we possibly can? So let's talk about the metrics of problem management, because problem management was one of the big three that I called out at the beginning here. The metrics of problem management: ticket volume. If you're effective with your problem management, the volume of tickets will drop on a per capita basis. So for example, in North America last year, 2021, the average end user would log 1.1 ticket per month at level 1 and 0.5 tickets per month for desktop support. So a total of 1.6 touches per month for an end user to IT service and support. Now that number varies dramatically by vertical market and a lot of other things. So for example, in an industry like gas and electric utilities, on average, an end user will only contact IT service and support 0.4 or 0.5 times per month or 6 times per year. Whereas in financial services, particularly fast moving business, that's working in cryptocurrency, for example, or financial services management, an end user might contact service and support 4 times a month, 5 times a month, or up to 60 or 70 times per year. And so what we're looking for here is a reduction in the ticket volume on a per capita basis. So if you divide ticket volume by the number of end users that you support, you want to see that number go down. Effective problem management reduces that number over time. And this is the outcomes I'm talking about here from the prior page: measurable results in problem management. Ticket volume on a per capita basis should go down if you're effective with your problem management. So tickets per user per month, total ticket volume, TCO, total cost of ownership, which is the cost of service and support at every level in the organization added together. So you look at cost of self-help, self-service, the cost of problem management, because that is a cost of support. You look at the cost of the service desk, level 1, you look at the cost of desktop support, field services, and level IT, meaning other levels of IT, vendor support, field services. You look at the cost of support at every level, you add it all up, that's your total cost of ownership. That should go down because a big part of problem management is shifting left, which I'll show you momentarily. And then tickets prevented. That's a hard one because you don't always know if your ticket reduction was entirely due to tickets that were prevented. But oftentimes, if you're looking at a metric like tickets per user per month, and that's going down steadily, let's say it goes from 2 to 1.9 tickets per user per month to 1.8 to 1.7 to 1.6 tickets per user per month. And if you're exercising and engaged in problem management in a deep way, you can probably attribute that reduction in tickets per user per month to your problem management. And so you can look at where you started, 2.0 or 2.1 tickets per user per month. Now you're down to 1.5 or 1.6 tickets per user per month. And you can probably safely say that most of that was due to problem management. We've reduced the tickets per user per month by 0.5 as a result of problem management. Now, here's a good time for us to talk about shift left. This diagram was put together based on 2021 data. And if we start on the far right, on average, a ticket resolved by a vendor in 2021 was about $600. Now, this is a fully loaded cost. It includes all the agents and technicians. It includes all the overhead, meaning the indirect personnel like supervisors, team leads, trainers, and the like. It includes all the facilities, the travel, the training, the office supplies, the HDI events, and everything else. So if you look at the total cost of vendor support and divide it by the volume of tickets, we're at about $600 per ticket. But that number varies dramatically. I've seen that number as low as $50 for a vendor ticket, and I've seen that number as high as $25,000 for a vendor ticket. So it really depends on the nature of the ticket. And what we're showing on this chart are averages. The ranges are huge. Please keep that in mind. The same thing is true with field support. Last year, the average fully loaded cost of a field support ticket was $220, but I've seen them resolved for as little as $20 and as much as several $1,000s, $2,000 or $3,000 per field support ticket. So again, these are averages. The ranges are quite dramatic. So the standard deviation around the average is quite dramatic. IT service and support, what we call level 3 support level, meaning a NOC or an application development group, for example, the fully loaded cost per ticket there is $104 on average last year. Desktop support, roughly $70. Level 1 support, fully loaded cost, $22 last year. Self-help, self-service is a different animal because what we have is not a variable cost because it doesn't involve agent assistance, but it does involve making an investment in technology and processes up front, and then that gets amortized over the volume of tickets that go through self-help, self-service, and on average, that cost is about $2. But if you drive a huge volume through that, let's say you're driving 100,000 tickets per month into self-help, self-service, your cost per ticket will be a lot less than $2. By contrast, if you only have 100 tickets per month going through self-help, self-service, you're probably not going to be saving a lot of money in that portal, and you might be up to $10, $15, or even $20 per self-help resolved ticket. So that $2 is an average, and it's dependent upon the volume of tickets that you drive into self-help, self-service, and the success rate of the end user or the customer that goes into that portal and is able to self-resolve their tickets. Then you have level -1, which is problem management. Level -1 is prevention. Used to be just called root cause analysis, but ITIL renamed it problem management. But in essence, it is root cause analysis. It is understanding the root causes of what is driving one or more incidents and eliminating those root causes so that you can eliminate those incidents altogether. That's level -1. And then last year, for the first time, I felt comfortable putting level -2 on this chart. This is AI, artificial intelligence. This is seek and destroy or search and destroy. It would include endpoint bots that monitor the endpoints like the hard drives and the servers and send alerts to IT when there's unusual behavior or anomalies detected. It also includes machine learning bots that will take data feeds from your ITSM system, ServiceNow, Sharewell, Remedy BMC, or any other ITSM system, as well as your remote tool, whether that's BombGuard or LogMeIn or some other tool, as well as your telephony system, as well as your chat system. It takes all these inputs and through machine learning, it connects the dots, and through massive computing power and data science, it can oftentimes identify anomalies ahead of time before they start generating tickets, before it creates an issue for an end user. So for the first time, and we've been waiting for this for a long time, AI seems to be on the verge of making a huge impact in IT service and support. Now, I'm not talking about voice and chatbots. What I'm talking about is true machine learning, where the data feeds, as I mentioned, the data produced by the ITSM system and captured by your telephony system, your knowledge base, if it's separate from your ITSM system and so on, you're ingesting huge amounts of information, you're applying data science models to it, and you're applying massive computing power to it to identify emerging problems before they start to impact your users. And so the AI tools are now becoming powerful enough to do this kind of thing. And what we're going to see in the future is a significant reduction in ticket volume at level -2 because the bots, the artificial intelligence, the machine learning specifically, and the endpoint bots will be smart enough to be able to detect anomalies and flag them early or eliminate them or self-heal them before they impact any users whatsoever. So problem management is all about operating at level -1. And you can see that if you're serious about shift left and you're moving tickets to the left, if you're resolving tickets at desktop support that could and should be resolved at level 1, you should do that. That's part of shift left. If you're resolving at level 1 when the user could be going to a self-help, self-service portal, you should do that. However, with the caveat that you don't want a user spending too much of their time in a self-help portal. The rule of thumb we have at MetricNet is 10 minutes and out. You know, if you can't get your problem or your incident resolved in 10 minutes, then go to an expert, go to the service desk, go to desktop support. But you shouldn't be spending, you know, hours and hours there, or even 15 or 20 minutes there, because self-help, self-service is meant for quick resolutions. It might be related to Windows or Office or Excel or Outlook or a password reset, as an example, very quick things that the user can do himself or herself. But you don't want the end user spending a lot of time there. So 10 minutes is a rule of thumb that MetricNet developed that seems to be a good cutoff point where the end user ought to be talking to a support professional if they can't get their own resolution within 10 minutes or less. So level 0 support, self-help, self-service is not a panacea, but there is a lot of effort going on right now in the industry to enhancing the robustness of the self-help, self-service portals so that users can get quick resolutions there when appropriate. Now, I want to introduce you to a couple of terms or a couple of metrics. One is problem velocity. So if we think about the incidents that are generated by a problem, we are going to be most concerned about those with high velocity. So if you have a known problem, and by the way, many large organizations have thousands of known problems, and they never get to the bottom of that list. They never eliminate them all. You're lucky if you eliminate the 10% that generate the vast majority of your incidents. So it's helpful to understand that if you're tracking known problems, it's not uncommon to have thousands of known problems, and to make a dent in that, say 10, 15%, which can eliminate the majority of incidents that are driven by those known problems. But nobody ever gets to the end of their list on known problems because you generate them faster than you can resolve them. But knowing which ones generate the most incidents on a monthly basis is important. This is what problem velocity is. So you take the number of incidents involved with a known problem and divide it by the number of months that the problem has been known. So if we have a known problem with 1,200 incidents attached to it, and it's been a known problem for a year, 12 months, we can take 1,200 incidents divided by the 12 months, the age of the problem, and say that the velocity is 100 incidents per month. By contrast, if we logged a known problem a month ago and it's generated 1,200 incidents in that 1 month, the velocity is 1,200 incidents per month. You can see that it would make more sense to focus on the high velocity incidents in your problem management because that's where you get the bigger bang for the buck. If you have a known problem that's generating 1,200 incidents per month versus a known problem that's generating 100 incidents per month, focusing on the problem that's generating 1,200 incidents per month and eliminating that from a root cause perspective gives you a better outcome because you're potentially eliminating 1,200 incidents per month, 1,200 tickets per month. So problem velocity is an important concept to understand, an important metric to understand when it comes to an idle hack around problem management. Also, there are incidents associated with problems resolved. And the way we look at this, I alluded to it earlier, is you look at a reduction in incidents on a per capita basis, or you look at incidents that are associated with known problems, and you look at the extent to which those incident types are eliminated or reduced over time as a result of your problem management efforts. And we can come up with a pretty good number for the incidents associated with problems resolved. This is an important success metric because if we eliminate, in the example I just gave you, the problem that's generating 1,200 incidents per month, and of course the number will vary month by month, but if we eliminate that underlying problem, we can say that, okay, we're preventing what we think is roughly 1,200 incidents per month. That's a pretty important success metric. You know, at $20 per incident, say 1,200 incidents per month, you're talking about $24,000 per month in TCO reduction if you are successful in your problem management efforts. So there's a significant TCO savings that's associated with successful problem management. And so the points I've been making are summarized here on page 13. If we look at the top 10 problems by incident volume, they will look different than the top 10 problems by problem velocity. So the velocity tells you how quickly a problem is generating incidents. The incident volume simply tells you how many accumulated incidents there are over the lifetime of the known problem. And so our top problem by incident volume is Outlook, but it's only second by incident velocity. Likewise, account locked turns out to be the second by volume, but account locked is fifth according to problem velocity. So the left-hand side, just pure incident volume, is not the way to approach problem management. The way to approach it is by looking at the top problems by incident velocity. That's where you get the biggest bang for the buck. So you're never going to get to the bottom of your list. The idea here is to prioritize and focus your time and attention in problem management on the top 10 problems by incident velocity or the top 20 problems by incident velocity. That's where you get the biggest bang for the buck. So let me share our first case study with you. This is from an insurance company. We did a benchmark for them. And one of the metrics that we include in a benchmark is the number of tickets generated per user per month. It tells you something about the workload that's generated by the users. And the CIO in this organization, it's a large insurance company that you would know the name if I shared it with you, noticed that their number was about 2.1 incidents per user per month, or 2.1 tickets per user per month. And the average in their benchmarking peer group was about 1.1 ticket per user per month. And he asked the right question. He said, why is it that our volume is 2x the peer group average in this benchmark? And what is it costing us? And the first answer that came out, not from me, but from another person who was in the room, they said, well, we spend, $12 million per year with our outsourcer. And he said, that's not what I'm talking about. And he was asking the right question. He said, how much is it costing us as a company in lost productivity to have 2x the number of tickets of the industry average in the insurance vertical? And we had done the ROI calculation ahead of time because we anticipated this question. Even though it's not a very common question, it was the right question. And we had done the calculation ahead of time. And we can estimate lost productivity based upon time and motion industrial engineering studies that organizations have performed. And we know, for example, that over a typical year, an individual FTE within an organization will lose up to 40 or 47 productive hours per year as a result of various IT-related incidents, service requests, questions, outages, and the like. So we had done the calculation to determine how much is it costing this organization in lost productivity because their ticket volume is 2x the industry average. And the answer, it's a pretty stunning answer, was that they were losing a little over $100 million in productivity per year as a result of their ticket volume being 2x the industry average. So it was the right question. The first answer that was given by another person in the company was, oh, we spend $12 million per year with an outsourcer. He named the outsourcer. And the CIO said, that's not what I'm asking. What I want to know is, what kind of impact does this have on our organizational productivity? And it was the right answer. If you read MetricNet's ROI white paper, we talk about the biggest contributor to ROI in service and support is the fact that you make end users more productive. In fact, that's the number one strategic purpose of IT service and support, is to make the end users more productive. And so he asked the right question. We gave him the answer. You're losing more than $100 million per year in user productivity because your ticket volume is 2x the industry average. And right then and there, CIO appointed what they call a tiger team. It's basically a SWAT team of individuals who were going to focus on problem management. He said, whatever you're doing, there were 4 individuals. He said, whatever you're doing right now, drop it. I will talk to your supervisors. I'll tell them you're no longer doing that. And you are to focus exclusively on problem management over the next 12 months. And your goal is to reduce our ticket volume by 50% over the next 12 months. So right then and there, he established this tiger team, gave them the mission of reducing their ticket volume by 50% over the next 6 months. And it took them less than a year. If you look at the lower right-hand corner here, the outcome, in less than a year, They reduced incident volume by more than 50%. Now, they didn't do any formal ITIL training at the beginning of this process, but many of them had been foundation certified. One person was even practitioner certified. So they had some ITIL knowledge. I don't want to lead you to believe that you can dive into this without some basic knowledge of ITIL. There has to be some understanding of the vernacular. You have to know what a problem is, an incident is. You have to know what incident management, knowledge management is. Some of these basic concepts are fairly important. But the interesting thing is that that was not their knee-jerk reaction. They didn't dive right into training and say, let's all get certified, and then let's start maturing ITIL, and then let's see if we can get a result. No, they did something very different. They hacked ITIL problem management to get a result as quickly as they possibly could. And essentially what they did is they ranked the problems by velocity, and they started looking at individual tickets associated with these high velocity problems. And they brought in the subject matter experts. These are individuals that work in IT service and support that had specific knowledge of applications or infrastructure. They looked at Splunk records, they looked at ServiceNow records, and they got to root causes and started to eliminate those root causes. And here's what happened. When we did the benchmark, their monthly ticket volume was almost 165,000. So it was a big organization. A year later, they were down to 79,000, more than a 50% reduction. They went from 2.2 tickets down to 1.03 tickets per user per month. TCO, that is the total cost of ownership, cost of service and support at every level in the organization, was about 60 million a year at the start of this, 59.4 million. They cut that by more than 50%. They were down to 28.2 million. Tickets prevented, really nothing when we started this process. Estimated 85,700 tickets per month prevented as a result of their problem management initiatives, as a result of their design thinking, working backwards from the goal. Let's reduce ticket volume by 50%. Let's figure out how to do it. Let's start diving into tickets. Let's bring the subject matter experts in from end-level IT, the application people, the infrastructure owners, the NOC people, the network people. Let's bring them in, have them help us. They have the subject matter expertise. And because they had CIO level support, they were able to get all of the players in the room at the same time. And they worked through these high velocity problems. They got to the root causes. They eliminated those root causes. And in less than a year, they were able to reduce their ticket volume by more than 50%, save the organization. Total cost of ownership by itself went from 59 to 28 million. But the big benefit, which we don't show on this particular page, is what was the impact on user productivity? Well, they returned an estimated $100 million of user productivity. So the metrics of knowledge management, shifting gears now, we've talked about problem management. What are some of the metrics we would look at in knowledge management? Well, handle time goes down when an organization leverages knowledge. MTTR, mean time to resolve, goes up typically because your resolution rate goes higher. Cost per ticket also goes down, typically because your handle time goes down. So if your handle time goes down, your cost per ticket is going to go down. These are the benefits of knowledge management. So two additional metrics I want to introduce you to here would be the self-service success rate. And what that means is the percentage of users who go into the self-help portal and get a successful resolution. So if you have 1,000 people a month go into your self-help portal and 500 of them get a successful resolution in self-help, that self-service success rate is 50%. The link rate is a metric that measures the percentage of tickets that have been closed either with knowledge, reused, or created. So you either create a knowledge article and link it to the ticket, or you link the ticket to an existing knowledge article. These are two fairly important metrics when it comes to knowledge management. So our second case study has to do with a retailer. And they had more than 5,000 knowledge articles when they embarked on a process to leverage knowledge more effectively within the organization. Okay, this CIO saw that there were 5,000 knowledge articles and wanted to know how good is this knowledge. And what came out fairly quickly is that it wasn't very good at all, because there was a huge amount of duplication. There were a lot of obsolete knowledge articles. There was a lot of inaccurate information in those 5,000 knowledge articles. And so once again, a team was stood up. This was a completely different organization. It was a retailer. It was an online retailer. But they stood up a team to swarm this idea. They started going through the knowledge articles. And bottom line is, that in a year, they had reduced these 5,000 largely worthless or useless articles down to 300 knowledge articles that accounted for that could be leveraged for roughly 2/3 of the total ticket volume that they were handling. So hopefully you're seeing the Pareto principle in use here. You saw it on problem management, where oftentimes the top 10 or 20% of problems by velocity account for 80 or 90% of your total incident volume. So you focus on the big bang for the buck opportunities, just like in knowledge management, you want to focus on the knowledge articles that have the biggest leverage for the organization, that impact the largest number of incidents. So they had whittled down from 5,000 largely non-used articles to 300 well-written articles that were relevant and that were specific to the majority of the incidents that they handled. So over the course of a year, they reduced the 5,000 articles down to 300 highly used articles that got attached to 2/3 of the incidents that came into the organization, 2/3 of the tickets that came into the organization. Again, they didn't start out with the traditional, let's get trained, let's get certified, let's go through this ITIL maturation process. Instead, they said, we have to figure out how to get better value out of our knowledge management, because we've got all these articles and they're simply not being used. So we need to do something. They stood up this SWAT team. They methodically went through the knowledge articles. They found those that were the most accurate. They updated them to the extent that they possibly could, again, by bringing subject matter experts into the process, getting help from these IT experts in applications, in networking, in the NOC, in other areas, mainframe data center, and so on. They got the help of those experts because they had CIO level support in doing that. And they were able to essentially boil down their knowledge management to these 300 key articles, which accounted for about 2/3 of all tickets. Now, they didn't stop there, but they did this within a year, and they greatly streamlined and improved the effectiveness of their knowledge management as a result of this. So if we look at the handle time before they began this initiative, it was almost 15 minutes per ticket, contact, I should say. Slight difference between contacts and tickets, but roughly 15 minutes per contact. A year later, they were down to less than 10 minutes per contact. The mean time to resolve for desktop support tickets went from 16 business hours, which is basically 2 business days, to 4 business hours, which is half a business day. Self-service completion rate, they weren't doing any self-help, self-service before. It was up to 17.5%, meaning that 17.5% of all tickets were resolved in self-help, self-service. CSAT went from 81.5% to 92%, and the cost per ticket dropped from $27, almost $28 down to about $21. So these are the metrics that we use to measure the success of this knowledge management initiative. And I want to go back to one of the central themes of this presentation, which is that your ITIL efforts need to produce results, whether it's knowledge, incident, problem management, or any of the other ITIL practices. Be thinking to yourself, what metrics can I use to measure the success of our ITIL efforts, the hours, the training, the time you put into ITIL? You want to get some benefit from it. And ITIL hacks is, if nothing, it's about measuring the effect of your ITIL initiatives. Are you getting better, faster, cheaper? In the 2 case studies I've just been through, we can prove that these organizations did get better and faster and cheaper. We were able to measure that. And that's the key point I'm trying to emphasize here, is that ITIL needs to be tied to outcomes. So if you're spending time on problem incident knowledge management or any of the other 31 ITIL practices, be asking yourself, what are we getting for it? What are we getting in terms of better and faster and cheaper? Better outcomes, higher customer satisfaction, better net promoter score, lower customer effort score, faster, quicker mean times to resolve, higher first contact resolution rate, cheaper, lower total cost of ownership, lower cost per ticket. So what are the success factors? Well, support from senior leadership helps. In both of the case studies I went through, these were backed by the CIO. And when you're trying to get help from subject matter experts at end level in IT, the application developers, the NOC experts, network experts, and so on, having that senior leadership support is critically important. Focus on your high velocity problems and knowledge articles. That's where you're going to get the biggest leverage, the biggest bang for the buck. If you eliminate these root causes you can potentially eliminate hundreds or even thousands of incidents at one time. Involve the subject matter experts, the application, product, and infrastructure owners, because they're the ones that have the deep knowledge that gets you to root causes. The root cause analysis is really just another name for problem management, and update your high velocity knowledge articles, the ones that are used most often. You focus on the high velocity problems first and the high usage knowledge articles, because again, that's where you can get the biggest impact. Think Pareto principle. Pareto 80-20 rule, 90-10 rule essentially says, how do we get 90% of the benefit for 10% of the effort, or 80% of the benefit for 20% of the effort? Provide just enough education, to Donna's point very early on, and understand that formal ITIL training and certification at advanced levels is probably not necessary. I think at a basic level, it's critically important to understand the vernacular and the language of ITIL, but it's not necessary to have a bunch of advanced and master's level ITIL practitioners on your team. So get enough education, but don't overdo it. Focus on results. That's the most important thing. Get the results as quickly as possible, not in months, years, or never, but in days or weeks. So effective problem management will reduce your ticket volume. This is beta review. It's going to reduce your tickets per user per month in your TCO, and the tickets prevented will increase. Knowledge management, you reduce your handle time, your mean time to resolve, your self-help, self-service completion rate, your CSAT, and your cost per ticket. These are the metrics of problem management and knowledge management. Tie these to your initiatives in problem and knowledge management. Measure it so you know what benefit you're getting from these ITIL practices. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Jeff. That was awesome. In the interest of full disclosure, I actually had the opportunity to see this presentation at Support World, and I thought it was awesome that time around, hence Jeff being here. So, and I thought it was equally great this time around. So far, no questions from the audience. So I'm going to ask you a question something I think about quite a bit. So the DevOps community, as an example, likes to push back on problem management a lot. And I hear this little mantra all the time: there is no root cause in a complex system. And I have a standard answer to that little mantra, but how do you answer that? We're seeing some pushback these days to problem management.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, there are usually multiple root causes. So
right.
if they're saying there is no one root cause, they're probably right about that. But there are multiple root causes in a complex system. Are they difficult to find? Yes. That's why problem management is not easy. So I would agree with them to a certain extent. To say there are no root causes, I think, is a cop-out. It says that they probably don't want to spend the time on it, or they think the complexity is too great. But problem management was invented for that reason. It was invented to segment and demystify and simplify the process of getting to root causes. So somebody who dismisses it out of hand that way is simply being intellectually lazy or dishonest, in my opinion, because there are root causes. You may not get to every one of them. In fact, you're never 100% successful in knowledge incident or problem management in particular. You're never going to be 100% successful in eliminating all those problems. So yes, they have multiple underlying causes, but to say that it's too complex is, again, in my opinion, that's a cop-out. Problem management is there to demystify the process and to simplify and segment the process and get to the big underlying drivers. So I would say, don't give up so easily. Right. And you're right, there's no one single root cause, except right. in very rare circumstances. There are multiple root causes, but this is why, major incidents, for example, are investigated endlessly or at a very deep level following a major incident, and they do get to root causes. So when somebody says it's too complex in a complex system, there you can't get to root cause, well, why is it then that you do postmortems on major incidents? Right. And why is it that virtually every major incident that occurs, you do find the root causes? Come on. Right. It's contradictory to say that you can't get to root causes in a complex system. That's just not true.
Right. I agree. I always kind of correct that statement and say there's no single root cause in a complex system, right? But I also think that it speaks to a poor implementation of problem management in some cases where people, maybe went out to search and find who made a mistake as opposed to finding what really happened, which if we think and work holistically, the issue might be technological. It might be related to our processes. It might be a human being making a mistake, right? Mm-hmm. And it might be see all of the above there. And so, yeah, you have to put the effort into doing it right. I launched a little bit of a poll while Jeff was answering, and I agree 1,000% with Jeff that I think we've just not done a good job in the IT service management community in general of understanding how to demonstrate an ROI. So my poll, kind of speaks to some of the things Jeff talked about. You have to start with a baseline. You have to start with an understanding of where you are. You have to get clear on what you want to measure in order to demonstrate outcomes, not just demonstrate that people are following processes, but that you are in fact producing the outcomes. Sometimes we've got, poorly defined processes in place, which very often translates into we're not capturing the data we need, or we don't have the ability to report on data. So thank you to everybody that's participating in the poll. I actually am going to craft a little bit of a blog and try to speak to this idea of how we can get better as a community of demonstrating the ROI, because the capability is there and we can use hacks like the ones Jeff shared with us today to help us get there more quickly. And on that note, I want to just say thank you very much, Jeff. I enjoyed very much sitting and seeing this presentation again. I'm sure our audience appreciated it as well. We're at time. And so for those of you who need to leave us, I'm going to say thank you very much, as always, for attending, and we look forward to seeing you in a future webinar. Jeff, if you have time, we actually had one question come in at the 11th hour. So do you have 1 second for the purposes of the recording to answer this quick question?
I'm actually running over time.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. Jessica, I will reach out to Jeff and I will pose the question to him, and we'll get back to you with an answer. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Jeff, very much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you.